Welcome to the Build Your Reiki Business podcast. I'm Christian of Standing Stones Healing, founder of the Reiki Business Collective and creator of the Build Your Reiki Business program, sending blessings and best wishes to your Reiki business. Greetings, welcome, and thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of the Reiki Business Podcast. It's Christian of Standing Stones Healing. So honored and grateful to have you. So thank you so very much. In this week's episode, we're talking about client boundaries in your Reiki business. Now, this topic is something that we indeed might talk about in the monthly Reiki Business Roundtable. This is a monthly gathering of Reiki practitioners to talk all about Reiki business topics, and you are welcome to join us. You can learn more at standingstoneshealing.com/roundtable. The link is down below. For Reiki practitioners like us, client boundaries can be a challenging experience for us. I know that I get lots of questions about setting and maintaining client boundaries. And boundaries really do matter in our Reiki business. Boundaries are helpful because they help us to prevent burnout. For us as Reiki practitioners, oftentimes we are giving, and we're giving a lot. And boundaries help us to stop from becoming burned out and to help prevent emotional exhaustion. So boundaries are important for our own mental and emotional well-being. They're also important to help us maintain a sense of professionalism. Boundaries are indeed important to professionals, and as Reiki practitioners, as Reiki business owners, it's important for us to consider ourselves as professionals, and professionals like therapists and doctors, lawyers, maintain boundaries. They also help us to maintain a sense of compassion for both ourselves and for our clients. I like to think of setting and enforcing boundaries as being firm but loving. I'll say more about that later, but indeed, boundaries are compassionate. It's not the opposite. Setting and enforcing boundaries is a compassionate act. And is compassionate for us, not only in terms of the mental and emotional factor, but also just simply the respect of us, ourselves, and our time. And boundaries allow us to respect ourselves and our time, and they help clients to respect our time. And they help clients to respect us and our time. So setting and enforcing boundaries isn't something that we do to someone else. So when we set boundaries, when we enforce boundaries, we often think that it's something that we're doing to someone, but it's not. Setting boundaries is something we do for ourselves, not to someone else. So we create boundaries for us, not something that we do to someone else. And setting and enforcing boundaries with clients is also for the client in the sense that it assists in their own growth and healing. So setting and enforcing boundaries is something that we do for the client as well to help them maintain healthy boundaries and to help them in their own growth and healing. Now, something really important about boundaries that we don't always realize is that we don't know what our boundaries are unless or until they are transgressed. Now, what that means is that if you find yourself struggling with boundaries, or you set a boundary and you have a hard time enforcing it, or you set a boundary and someone has transgressed the boundary, I want to encourage you to be kind and gentle and loving and compassionate with yourself when this happens. Because we can't know what our boundaries are unless or until we bump up against them. So we can't know, for instance, if a boundary with a client is providing them with too much help and support to the point where it is negatively impacting us, unless or until we do that. So when we do, it's important for us to be kind and gentle and loving of ourselves. So how do we set boundaries with clients? Well, what really matters is what feels right to and resonates with us. But I have a few tips that are really helpful for any and all of us, no matter what our Reiki business looks like, and no matter what kind of boundaries we might want to set. But having very clear business policies is really the first step in setting and enforcing boundaries with clients. And so these kinds of policies might be things like your appointment start and end times. And I know that there are plenty of Reiki practitioners out there who just like to go with the flow in the session, and they'll know when it's done, and they'll know when to end it. And their sessions might be anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours. But this isn't always the best approach for setting client boundaries and setting expectations. And so I first recommend for boundaries is to have clear start and end times. So have clear times when your appointments start and when they end, and have a clear length of time for the session. And you might think, well, this is so hard. How can I do this whenever the session is just meant to go with the flow, and you can't put start and end times to Reiki, Christian, and you just know when the flow is done? Maybe, but it's really helpful for us and for clients to have those set start and end times. And it's just simply respectful of the client's time. I don't know about you, but I don't really want to go into an appointment. I don't want to go into a Reiki session saying, okay, how long is it going to take this time? Last time it was an hour. The time before that, it was 2 hours. I don't know how long I want this to last. And quite frankly, I might not set another appointment if I don't know how long it's going to take. So when we have clear start and end times, it's not just for us. It is also out of respect for the client. I also recommend having clear cancellation and rescheduling policies. So policies about cancellation, policies about rescheduling, and even payment policies too. And to make them clear and to share them with clients. Now, I personally do this where, of course, I have these policies written into my terms, and those are on my website, but the terms are not really clear. They're at the bottom of the page in the footer, where you can click for the terms and privacy policy. And so it's not easy to see those. So what I do is that every time someone schedules an appointment, there is a checkbox that they have to check that says, yes, I agree, I have read and agree to the terms and policies. I might also clearly state the cancellation policy and that they agree to that as well. Now, whether or not a client reads them is frankly not my problem. But that they agree to them is my problem. And so making sure that we have those policies clearly written and that we're sharing them, we're making them easily accessible to clients is really important. So that if we have someone who comes to us and says, "Oh no, I need to reschedule, how do I do that?" You can say, "Well, it's in the policy, here's the policy," and just provide them with a link to the policy. Now, along with that idea is to reinforce the policies through your communications. So the ways in which you might interact with a client or a client might interact with you. So I mentioned, like, in my intake process, whenever they book an appointment, it's right there in the scheduling platform that they have to agree to it. You may also want to reinforce these boundaries through your intake forms, where, including the policies and procedures on your intake forms is a good idea. Even having someone agree to them on the intake form, checkbox, I agree to the policy, whether your intake form is written or digital, whatever format it might take. Enforcing the policies, reinforcing them through things like email or in your disclaimers, just making sure that you are communicating the policies clearly to clients and they're seeing these multiple times in different formats. And in addition to clear business policies, you can have clear personal policies as well. And these personal policies may center on things like when you will or won't respond to a client. So for instance, maybe responding to client phone calls or emails or texts during certain business hours. So you will only respond Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, or respond within 24 hours, but that if someone sends you a message, a phone call, an email, that you are not setting yourself up for the expectation that you're going to respond right away. And so if someone sends you a message, an email, and they don't hear back from you in 2 hours, and they send you another one, "Did you get my email?" Then you can respond with, "Thank you for your message. My policy is to respond within 24 hours of every email because I have lots going on, lots of clients each day. I may not get to your message right away, but I will respond within 24 hours. Or, of course, however you handle it, but having that policy means that you have the expectation set for yourself of when you will and won't respond and how you will react in certain situations. Because setting boundaries ultimately tells us how we will react in a given situation. And so when that situation arises, boundaries tell us that we already know beforehand how we are going to act. And so setting the boundary of saying, I will respond to clients within 24 hours, or I will not respond to clients over the weekend, means that when a client reaches out to you, you know that you don't have to respond right away, but that you will respond within 24 hours. This is indeed something that you can communicate to a client, but there are boundaries that we can set for ourselves that we don't communicate with clients, and that's okay too. Or maybe a boundary is, I do not respond to clients on the weekend. Whether it's phone call, text, email, I just don't respond on the weekends. And so if you receive communication from a client on a Saturday, you know already before it happens that you're not going to respond until Monday. Now, again, you may want to communicate that to clients beforehand. Put that in your messaging, your intake forms. Have it as a signature in your email. Put it as an auto respond on your email when they email you on the weekends. Thanks for your message. I'm currently out of the office. I'll respond on Monday. However you would like to approach that. Having your own personal boundaries, in addition to those clear business policies, is also very helpful. But how do we enforce boundaries? So it's one thing to set boundaries, but once we set them, we have to enforce them. Otherwise, boundaries are meaningless. So yes, there will come a time when you need to enforce the boundaries, because simply setting the boundaries isn't enough. So when we have these clear business policies, part of enforcing the boundaries is setting expectations up front. And so letting clients know things like how long to expect the session to be, what they can expect during a session, how it works. And so all of our processes help to set client expectations. Our scheduling process, where we can communicate all of these things to clients. Our welcome emails, where we can set those expectations. And at the beginning of the session too, when we chat with clients, these are all opportunities to set expectations, which enforces boundaries. We want to make sure that our messages align and reinforce one another. So in other words, we don't want to have any discrepancies in our messaging, any conflicts in our messaging, any confusing messaging. That we have a message that says your session will last an hour, and then a client comes in to see us and they're with us for 2 hours. That kind of conflict of messaging tells a client that they don't know what to expect, and tells them that your policies and boundaries aren't really enforced. So we want to make sure to be clear, and we want to make sure that there's no conflict in our messaging between what we say and what we do, and that all of the messages align and agree as well, so that our scheduling process doesn't say that you can cancel within 24 hours, but then our terms of service say within 48. When we have these clear messages and a conflict arises, then we can simply just point to the policy. And so if someone wants to reschedule after canceling at the last minute, you can simply say, I'm sorry, but the policy says this. My business policy is. And so you can always blame the policy. You can always point to the policy when there's a conflict and say, I'm sorry, this is just my policy. And so then it's not a personal thing with the client, it's just the policy. And so then the client can know it's nothing personal against them, it's just the policy. I also recommend having something that you can't do, but rather that you can do. So in this instance where someone wants to reschedule right at the last minute, focusing on what you can do rather than what you can't do can be really helpful. So for instance, rather than saying, well, I'm sorry, we can't reschedule because of the policy, but we can fill in the blank. So for instance, I can't refund your session fee because you've canceled at this late time, but I can offer a discount on your next session or something like that. Whatever you want, it's your business, right? But to focus not on what we can't do, but on what we can do. Boundaries are not so much a no as they are a yes. When we have a boundary, like a fence, we might think that the boundary is saying no. No, you cannot cross this fence. No, you cannot come inside. But a boundary is also saying yes. Yes to what's inside the fence. Like, do you see all of this space inside the fence? Yes to all of this space. You can go anywhere you want within this boundary. You can't go outside the fence, but you can go anywhere you want inside the fence. So boundaries we can think of as a no, but they are also a yes to what's inside the boundary. And so focusing on the yes of the boundary can be really helpful when we're dealing with enforcing boundaries. And so we're focusing on the yes, we can do this rather than on the no. So when we enforce a boundary, we have a client coming to us and saying, I need to cancel last minute. Can we reschedule? I'm sorry. It's in the policy. We can't reschedule at the last minute, but we can fill in the blank, whatever it is for you in your business. But it may be, I'm sorry, we can't do that, but we can schedule another appointment for 50% off. So I can't refund your session fee, but I can schedule you at a discount. So focusing on the yes and what can be done during the enforcement can be helpful when we have to enforce boundaries, which, of course, as business owners, we will need to do. And boundary enforcing situations come up all of the time in our Reiki business. You are not a bad Reiki business owner when they do come up. So please know that you're not doing anything wrong. It's simply part of the process of having a business. And so when these situations arise, it's not a matter of if, but rather when. And when they arise, it's important for us to be firm, but loving. We can be firm and loving at the same time. And so to be firm on the boundaries, but to bring kindness and compassion to the enforcement of the boundaries. Our clients, when they do things like cancel last minute, are not trying typically, they're not trying to be pains in the butt. And they're not trying to be challenging. And so it's important for us to remember that and to bring kindness and compassion. Absolutely, bringing the precepts to our enforcement of boundaries is really important. Reiki is here to support us with the enforcing of boundaries, with those precepts. Just for today, being kind with the enforcement of boundaries, right? And of course, offering ourselves Reiki for support in the creation and enforcement of our client boundaries. So, what are your thoughts on client boundaries? What are some of your boundaries and how do you enforce them? Whether they are with late payments or frequent cancellations or clients messaging you with lots of questions or friends as clients. There are so many kinds of boundary situations. We can't talk about them all in a single podcast episode. That's why you can join us in the Reiki Business Collective Facebook group and tell us all about it at facebook.com/groups/Reiki Biz. Sending lots of blessings and best wishes to your Reiki business. Thanks for tuning in to the Build Your Reiki Business podcast. Please like, share, subscribe, and send to a friend. Learn more about the Build Your Reiki Business program at standingstoneshealing.com/build, sending blessings and best wishes to your Reiki business.